Yes, I'm here in flesh, so it's had a half an hour drive, so much shorter travel than many of you had to endure to get here. Yeah, so my name is Laksa, and I am here from the Faroe Islands. And I would like to speak to you about sustainability of this marine mammal utilization and considering sustainability. But before I start, I would like to just briefly bring some caveats to the table. I am a CEO of Tórshavn in the Faroe Islands. We focus on sustainable development and innovation within commercial fisheries and aquaculture here in the Faroes. And I'm a political scientist, and I have expertise in marine ecosystem services, evaluations, and ecosystem-based management and sustainability. And we work a lot with sustainable food systems related to fisheries and aquaculture. It's important to also mention here that for this topic, my only interest is that I'm Faroese, and I have traditions here and our culture here, but I do not have any skin in the game, as they say. So what I'm going to be focusing on then is try to apply some of the frameworks that we work with related to fisheries and aquaculture and try and apply them to marine mammals. In particularly, I will be a bit biased with the Faroese perspective, but I think the other perspectives have been well covered, and it's been really inspirational to sit and listening to the other presentations, and I actually wish I had heard many of them before I did this one, but there you go, I might be able to relate to some of it. So I'm going to be briefly thinking about ecosystem-based management and the importance of that, of ecosystem services, and this relates very much to, which is mentioned several times this morning, about how we portray humans and nature, or how they see themselves in relation to each other, and if this is food or an icon, charismatic species, and so forth. But then I'm also going to briefly look at sustainable food systems. What do they typically entail, and how does it relate? And my final point will be relating to the importance of this societal debate internally within our communities about how we can continue improving the sustainability of these practices. My only claim to fame when it comes to marine mammals is I am part of this small networking project that is founded by the Nordic Council of Ministers. We do not have a report. We expect there will be a report from this project at the end of this year. So if you're interested in that topic from the Nordic perspective, obviously you'll keep your eyes for that report. My role is very limited in that. It's coordinated by Mattis in Iceland, and since we do not utilize seals in the Faroes, it's quite limited. So I just briefly wanted to think about ecosystem-based management. Now this session is actually also climate, it has climate in the title. And I think that the talks are actually not so climate related when we think about the impact of climate on these populations. So that's also a very important topic that we need to keep in mind. But ecosystem-based management, I don't want to read the definition, but I chose deliberately to take the one from Arctic Council, how they've defined it. And the idea with that is that we integrate the thinking across environmental, socioeconomic, political, and sectoral realms, and we take into account interactions between species. That would also include marine mammals, of course. Often when we talk about this, we talk about fish and not marine mammals. And then we will, by doing so, we'll reduce environmental damage, protect biodiversity, and obviously, through doing so, promote the health and prosperity of local communities. And ecosystem-based management has often been, it's what we all want to do, but it's often been a challenge to operationalize that. So how do we take that into account? And that's very important. And this is also critical to achieving the sustainability of, and improving the sustainability of marine mammal utilization. And basically, and this related obviously to, I saw an article in preparing for this presentation in the conversation from 2 years ago, and this was obviously relating to the discussion that's already been mentioned about the abundance of seals and the potential culling of seals to take into account the interactions between cod and seals. And this relates to also a personal experience that I had. I was working on an ecosystem-based project called Mariframe, a European project, and where we had the west of Scotland, the demersal fisheries, as one of the case studies. And they were doing ecosystem-based modeling, and they were looking at the interaction, different management scenarios, and one of them included seal culling in order for the depleted cod stocks to recover. And it was very, very controversial. And so, like, even just as a thinking experiment in the stakeholder interactions that we had in the local area, this was so completely unheard of. So that's just an interesting point, that they are a no-go for many, many countries, as we know. This also relates to, I mean, the UN assessment, the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. They've categorized ecosystem services into 4 categories. So you're regulating and supporting, cultural and provisioning. If we take away the regulating and supporting, this relates directly to the presentation earlier, which was, is this food, or is it a culture, a source of inspiration, ecotourism? And I think it's very important, because for us in the north, also in the Faroes, I think they are very much both. So they are a source of, we see, I got this nice paper on the way in from Japan, you know, looking at how it's inspired art and so forth, and we have that in all the communities. The importance that this is a cultural resource, and it's a source of inspiration for us. But it's also a source of food and clothing and so forth. And that for us is not a conflict, but in many, obviously, places it is. I work a lot with the EU, so I thought just to choose the EU's farm to fork strategy, how they define a sustainable food system. And it needs to ensure sufficient and varied supply of safe, nutritious, affordable, and sustainable food to people at all times, not least in times of crisis. And that's something that unfortunately came more to the forefront. People begin thinking a bit differently, like what if food will be scarce, as they say, and will we need to continue this practice, people would say, so that we don't lose the ability to hunt food, to be self-sufficient. So what the EU also says is that their food systems, the European food systems, are unsustainable, both from a health and environmental perspectives. So clearly we are not, that's not what we want. So what is the difference? I think that is sort of the conflicting worldviews that we have, or perspectives that kind of clash there. But clearly, so I thought it would be useful to look at, and this relates obviously to the ban as well, and the very unfortunate consequences that it has on the ban on sealskin and seal products. So I took this nice picture from Great Meals for a Change. It was obviously land-based, but I still liked it. And the idea is that the sustainable food needs to be ecologically responsible, and by that we mean it should be environmentally and biologically sustainable. So that we can say that it is. We have moved, there's a nice poster outside, if you haven't seen it, looking at, it said, are we stuck in the past? So it's looking at the management of marine mammals and how we have moved, how we have improved the practice, how we now have regulated stocks, we have protected stocks where needed, and so forth. So there we can definitely say that we are performing quite well. We can be relatively happy about that. Then you have obviously, again, the biological. We just saw also about the CO2 emissions of seal products. Again, they are performing better than the imported alternatives. And also, again, sustainability is not just about, it's not just about the emissions. There's also other aspects that we should consider there as well, like pesticide use, land use, and so forth. The fairness and accessibility is another one which is very positive. In the Faroese case, I can talk about the pilot whale hunt, where we share it amongst the communities. Everyone can participate, and it's a very positive sort of good example of a fair and accessible food system. It is a local food. Everyone has access, and it's also important, not just local, so that we avoid the transportation, which we saw in the previous presentation is not as substantial if you use sea freight, but it's also culturally appropriate. So it's the food that we can relate to. We've seen the importance of having a connection to our food. So there we also perform well. When it comes to the no waste, we can say also, I'm not sure exactly how much is wasted, but generally we use a lot of the products. I'm a little bit, in the Faroese case, I have some concern that we maybe have a bit too much, that people, because we see that the people eat less whale meat, so I'm not sure if they are, what happens to this whale meat, because I think we have a bit too much quantities of it. So that's a question that I have, to which extent is there no waste from that, and to which extent can we perform better on that? And I don't have enough detail about other species. And then it's the health. It is very, very healthy, it's very nutritious, and we have a source of import. And we have communities that have for centuries depended on these resources and have adapted and need this food. That is, in the case again of the pilot whale, there's many other marine species that do not have this problem. But there we have a problem. We have public health authorities in the Faroes who, in a few years back, said that pilot whale meat is not suitable for human consumption. It was that clear. Before that, we had the recommendation that women and children should not be consuming it. Now it should not be consumed. I am one of the women that have not been consuming whale meat or pilot whale meat for a long time. I have started again. I finished with my children, so I'm in the clear. But still, there's a lot of people who will not eat it, obviously, for these reasons. But it's still a very important food, and also culturally important. So it's something to celebrate and a connection again with the past. The important point I think that is to make here is that I think we would all agree that it is the local communities or countries that have the right to utilize their resources. So I'm not going to go through this, you are probably all familiar with this, but the idea that how we organize and utilize the management and utilize our resources, that is up to the respective communities and countries. That being said, and that's, I think all Faroese people would agree on that, there is still increasing debate about to which extent should we continue and in which way should we adapt. And that is mainly due to the external pressures. Although sometimes I feel like the external forces, which are on the outside, they kind of make us a bit more stubborn. So yes, we decide, so we will continue doing so. But we have this kind of urban pressures coming in. We have them directly through bans, like the seal one, the seal products ban from the EU. But we also have them indirectly through market pressures. For instance, aquaculture or fisheries products from the Faroes and pressure coming outside. But that's not, I think, where we should ask the questions. It is up to us how we utilize the resources. But the health concerns and the cultural norms and values within our country, that's where we should be positioning ourselves. Like, what is it? Are they shifting? Because traditions and cultural norms, they are also shifting. And that's also very much what the ecosystem-based approach is about. It's about considering, obviously, multiple uses of the ecosystem or of the sea, about how we can deal with conflicting objectives and trade-offs. And that's where that debate, I think, very much needs to take place. For instance, it comes to the point where we want to ask the question, or we continue to ask it, and I think it is a continuous debate, is what are the costs and benefits of the continued utilization? And I don't think, I mean, that's something for another day, but that's also very much why I welcome this conference, because it's also an opportunity for us to have the debate in an international arena here and then be inspired from other perspectives from elsewhere and bring that to the Faroese debate. So these are my two boys. We had a whale hunt in my village. This is just, I live just up the street, 2 weeks ago or something like that. And they were in tears, both of them. Even though we have, I mean, it is frequently, this is a good whaling bay, so it happens frequently, they have seen it before. But they couldn't understand, why do we do this? And we don't need the food, they say, you know. And I told them, this is the same in a sense as when you go to the supermarket and you want a steak or you want chicken. They also have to be killed, you know, and we try to explain and talk about it. But that feeling that they have about the whale hunt, I think it is a generational shift we are seeing. And this relates very much to this charismatic species we're talking about. And that relationship, and we will see if that changes. But when we think about making a conclusion, and I'm very, very always to call anything a sustainable practice or not, because I think there's always ways to improve and change. And that's, I think, also to get the broader perspective. When I prepared for this, I read this nice report by NAMMCO, and where they highlight the role of marine mammals. And I'm not going to read the whole thing out, but it's important to highlight that they contribute to a strong, resilient, and sustainable circumpolar region, and they are empowering these coastal people. And they also promote this resource sharing and are a source of employment in areas where you would not be able to live if you didn't have this. So I think that's a very important perspective to have also when we go and talk about, and this is not from the Faroes to the other areas, but more from the outside into these kind of areas which have this dependency, to consider this, obviously, the crucial importance of this activity. And the pollution, the reason why we are debating this in the first place, I think to a large degree, is the pollution itself. That is a sort of environmental injustice. That is just like climate change. We are seeing that this food, these marine mammals, they are being polluted, so they are no longer suitable as food in some cases, like in the Faroes case. And that's something, but it doesn't just threaten them as food items, it also threatens the populations themselves. And that's very important to consider as well. And again, we need to consider the multiple threats that these marine mammals are facing, and hunting is just a small part of that. And I think we need to consider when we talk about sustainability that it's very multidimensional. And I deliberately didn't take the SDGs in because there was supposed to be a presentation on the SDGs before mine, but that you will see tomorrow. But for me, sustainability is not yes or no, because it's so complex. It's not even just about social, economic, and by obviously the ways that we categorize them. But there are many subtopics under there. So I think we need to have good management and societal debate all the time and think about how we can evaluate ourselves and continue to improve this practice. Because if we don't, in the Faroes case at least, we need to adapt in order to preserve this practice. And that was my thought. Thank you.
Thank you.